Oh my goodness, we're live and we made it. I cannot believe it right now. We've had a lot of technical difficulties this morning, but if you're listening, we're going to get to the good stuff here in a minute because we're going to talk about how you can balance your day no matter what type of life you live, whether your Wi-Fi is going out and you can't get your podcast to run for the last hour, whether you're a dad with 4 kids and a wife, a dad with 2 kids and a wife, a dad with 1 kid and a wife, or you're Abby Murphy. We're going to cover it all today. No, we've had some technical issues this morning. If you're watching the live stream, as you can tell, we've upgraded this podcast significantly in terms of the equipment we're using, the amount of cameras we have going, and I think our Wi-Fi, just the capacity of it is kind of struggling. But things look a little bit different today. So first, we'll talk about the elephant in the room, or I should say the Abby in the room. You like that? So usually I'm producing everything. I got my camera, or I got my computer. Everything's sitting right here in front of me. I'm controlling the switcher, and Wade and Kevin don't have to do anything. But
We're still
today,
not doing anything at
still
all.
not doing
We're still
anything.
not doing anything.
But I don't. Did we announce last week that Abby joined the team or no? Did we?
Yeah,
we did.
so,
Okay.
on
So
Instagram.
okay.
There was a
Well, I
post.
meant on the podcast.
No,
Okay.
I don't-
So
I
on the
don't think so.
podcast, I don't think we did. So we have a new member to the Move Well team, Miss Abby Murphy. She was on the podcast about 3-4-ish months ago. But now she is on in Move Well team capacity. So she's going to be helping with pretty much any and everything. If you don't follow Abby on social, you need to. She's awesome. And yeah, give a little intro real quick, Abby.
Hello, everybody. I was about to do like my intro for
Yeah.
my
Hey,
own
that's all right.
podcast because it's just so like ingrained in me. But hi for anyone that's watching. Hi, listening people. If you're listening to this podcast, keep going. You're doing great. Yeah, my name's Abby Murphy. It is officially my 6th day working here. So my 2nd week. I'm super excited to be here and to join the team. I can't wait to just learn from you guys, grow alongside you, and help with everything. And I don't know, I'm just being back here smiling from ear to ear. I'm super excited. And this is my first behind the table kind of podcast situation too. So I'm excited to see where this all takes us.
Yeah. Well, Abby is obviously very creative, has a lot of creative energy and just brainstorms. She's young. And so she's going to help a lot with the podcast and bring some new cool concepts. She's going to be on the podcast more and help her come up with topics, help lead conversation. And like she said, really doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff of like producing what it looks like, what it sounds like, and helping all that. She has a really awesome podcast. I'm not gonna charge her for me advertising her podcast on here. That's Life Podcast if you guys want to go listen. But
Wow,
no,
thank you so much for the plug. I
yeah,
really
of course,
appreciate
yeah.
it.
And again, we won't charge her today for that. But
Next week we will.
yeah, next week we might if we throw
It's
any
just
more.
complimentary.
Yeah, this just because it's our 2nd week here. No, but today we really just want to talk about, and we've kind of covered this topic before, but really just talking about like how do you balance your life with fitness, with family, with work, and just your overall wellness. So like health, fitness, nutrition, all that stuff. But what we also recognize is that everybody's life is different. So it's all relative to each person. Just like people always say, what's hard is relevant to you. It's all respective to each person. So how I structure my day and how I balance my day is going to be different than what Kevin's is. It's going to be different than what Wade's is. It's going to be different than what yours is if you're listening to this right now. So I think a way we kind of broke this out to go through it is just talk about 3 different areas. Talk about what our days look like when we have all of our, basically if you get everything done in a day, what does it look like for us? And then next we talk about what are the non-negotiables. So if there's days where you're going to have to sacrifice in some areas, what are your non-negotiables? What is the thing you're going to get done that day? And then obviously the other thing is just giving like actual practical examples, like how that plays out, like what it looks like. So I think the easiest way is to just go through and talk about if our day went exactly how we wanted it every day, here's what it would look like and how we balance that. So I think we're going to kick it off with Wade because he's writing down notes over there.
No, I'm just writing down the 3 because my mind will not be able to remember all that.
Alright,
So you're
okay.
good.
Okay. So basically just
That's
go,
good. We got
yeah.
cheat sheet here. We're ready to rock. and
yeah.
roll.
So basically just talk through like, if say we're training for something or you want to train for something and you want your day to look a specific way, what does that look like? So I'll kick it off then. So basically an ideal day for me, being a dad of 1 child and being married, working a full-time job, get up, I'm in the gym by 5:30. I'm getting my lift in that day. Then I go back home, help my wife get Leah ready get our daughter ready for the day, take her to the sitter. I'm in the office by 8 a.m. I've got it clean. I got the trash taken out. Everything's done. Well, you got something to throw in for that?
No.
Trash taken out, everything done. And then I'm big on running on my lunch break. So ideally, get up, you're in the gym by 5, everything's done. I'm in the office by 8. And then usually from like 11:30 to 12:30, I'm hitting my run about 7 miles. And then come back, finish the workday out, go pick my daughter up. Home, dinner's ready by 6 o'clock, daughter's in bed by 8 o'clock. Now, that's not how every single day goes. But when I look at my non-negotiables, the 2 biggest things for me are taking my daughter to the sitter every day. So like if there's days where we had a long night, I'm not gonna be able to make it to the gym, or if I sleep in late and that's on me, I'm not gonna try to rush out and tell my wife like, hey, will you take Leah to the sitter today? Like understanding that my decision is going to impact my families as well. That's something that I have to realize too. And so my non-negotiable obviously is family first, is making sure that I can get my daughter to the sitter and not pawn that off of my wife because she has a longer drive to work than I do. And then honestly, the second non-negotiable for me is some type of movement, and understanding that if I was going to do something else on my lunch break, I had something else planned. I'm like, no, I slept in today, didn't get to get it done. So I'm going to get some type of movement in for an hour today. And so for me, those are the 2 biggest things. So if it's not going exactly as planned, then I know that one area is going to have to sacrifice. And in the morning, it may be my fitness. I wanted to work out that day. And on my lunch break, if I had something else planned, I was going to go and grab food somewhere. I know that I'm going to have to eat whatever I brought for leftovers and get a run in on my lunch break, or get a walk in, whatever you have time for. So I think realizing that it's really easy to just throw away your day when it doesn't go as planned in some area of the day. So because you missed your workout in the morning, you're like, oh, forget it. My whole day's messed up. I'm not going to do any of it according to plan today. So realizing that just because your expectation of the day isn't playing out exactly how you thought, you just have to sacrifice and make that work. So I think actually the order I want to go is talk about your non-negotiables. So if there's a day it doesn't go according to plan, what is the area that you're going to sacrifice to make time for, Kevin?
Man, none of my days ever go according to plan.
Yeah.
So kind of my background, we talked about it here before, but 4 kids. So I married 4 kids, I have a 9-year-old, 4, 3, and 1, and we homeschool them. So they're always at the house. So just things are changing all the time. Like this morning, I had the alarm set early, was going to run. Then my 1-year-old woke up. And so it's like, okay, well, that's going to be set aside. So then, typically lunch break, I always go home at lunch as well to spend time with them. So I pretty much, so my non-negotiables, I guess what it's gotten to probably is 8 or 9 minutes. Honestly, it's the Exodus 90 app. I mean, honestly, so it's basically a daily devotional I do. And it takes about 8 or 9 minutes. And I did all 365 of those last year, and I've been going strong this year. So that's probably it. To start my day, and then some form of prayer, with that. Other than that, it all kind of falls. I mean, honestly, yeah. I know. So what I do typically is, instead of like, here's my daily things, I have things I strive to get done, but I kind of have a weekly goal, and I kind of have to just float my week to make that work, honestly. Because like my goal of running 38 miles a week, well, I wanted to run today. I was going to do like 7 was my goal. Well, I haven't gotten to run yet. Yeah. And I likely won't be able to run today, probably. Hopefully I can tonight, but I don't know. So I'm hopefully tomorrow I can get it. But I did do my devotional. So that's one of the things, like I can hold my daughter and do that. So I worked through that this morning while I was holding her, kind of rocking her back to sleep. Got her back down in time, but then I had some chores that should be some non-negotiables that I do a horrible job of doing. And I'm trying to get better at that. So just trying to help my wife out around the house. And so I did those instead of running today. So I would like to say like my daily chores, but if Amanda's listening to this, she would just like laugh, because I'm so horrible at them, but I'm trying to make
she wouldn't be the only wife laughing. So.
I'm trying to make those a priority. So I have 5 of them that I would try to accomplish each week. Like today was to clean the floors. And I hadn't done it in weeks. So it's like, I'm like literally like scrubbing, yogurt off the floor.
Making up for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So normally if I get in a routine, it's not bad, but yeah, I guess just some form of daily prayer is non-negotiable. And I would say some form of movement. I mean, whether it's me running or I'm going to do something that day. Maybe it's with the kids. We're going to get out of the house. We'll do something today. Hopefully I can run. Like the other night, they were playing in the garage. I ran on the treadmill.
Yeah.
So I just have to adapt from what I originally had planned. But yeah, some prayer, devotional, some form of movement. That's probably that, I guess.
Yeah. Wade, what you got?
It's kind of like Kevin's.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like with the wife at home, she stays at home. She used to teach. This is the second year she's been at home with our kids. So we've got a 4-year-old, will turn 4 in April. My son just turned 1 in November. So similar ages to a couple of Kevin's kids. So they're always at home, right? Unless they're doing some sort of activity. So typically, like a day for me usually starts around 4:30 or 5, where I try to work out in the morning. If it doesn't happen in the morning, it's hard to see it happening in the afternoon for me, just due to work commitments. Still work some PRN at a hospital back home. So like my lunch breaks, if I have that free, typically I'm running to cover at the hospital during my lunch breaks. And then once work's over, I want to be present at home.
Yeah.
So if I don't get some sort of movement in, it's typically going on a walk with the kids or doing something outside with the kids. Because not only are we trying to have some movement, just my wife and myself, we're trying to instill some sort of healthy activity outside for our kids, doing the 1,000-hour that we've talked about before on the podcast, 1,000-hour outside in the year. So it's either going to be a walk or just playing out in the backyard. I mean, that's going to be some form of movement. I mean, I'm going to be outside walking, playing, lifting them. It's not going to be an intense run by any means, but it's some sort of activity. In the past, I would see that as a loss for the day, but as I'm getting older, I'm trying to see that as big wins, just spending more time with my kids and not getting upset with not getting my workout in for the day. Whereas I struggle the most is more of my nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. That's where if I miss a couple of days working out, that usually coincides with I'm eating like 6,000 calories in a day and eating terrible. Whereas I've really dialed that in this last year and just eating to fuel myself to feel good. So as long as I can stay consistent with that, that's more of my non-negotiable is just making sure I'm eating healthy whole foods. Missing a couple of days here and there of working out, it's not going to impact me as much as it would have if I was still eating that bad. And then I would say my biggest non-negotiable is putting my kids down for sleep. I feel like bedtime routines and spending that time with them, spending the time in prayer with them at the end of the night. I want to make sure I'm home for that. Yeah. So even if I know Kevin and I, we've made a big commitment to that, and we've done day trips to New Orleans and back where we're on a flight, but we made sure we were back to see our kids to put them in bed, so I feel like those are more the non-negotiables. I would love to get some form of movement, but I wouldn't say that's typically at the top of my list right now. I'll at least get that in 5 times during the week. But I'd say it's probably more family focused if I don't get it in first thing in the morning.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I found is if you struggle to think of like non-negotiables, I think 2 things to realize or 2 things to consider is, one, it's going to look different depending on whatever season you're in, right? Yeah. So like whenever, and maybe it's time of year or something that you're training for, if it's movement oriented, or if you don't have any kids, obviously non-negotiable for you is probably not going to be family oriented. Maybe it is some type of like movement focused, or spending time or like calling a family member each day or getting a walk in or whatever it might be. And then the second thing is a daily non-negotiable should be something that is significant enough that it's going to impact the other aspects of your day. So thinking about, use putting your kid to sleep for an example, like if throughout the day you're not going to be home early enough to be with your kid and put them in bed, it's likely going to fluster you. You're going to feel in a funk for most of the day. So knowing to plan the rest of your day accordingly, to know, okay, I need to get everything done so I can get home and put my kids to bed, because that's what I look forward to, because that's my daily non-negotiable. And I use movement as an example for me, because I know that, like, even my wife says it, like, when you get a run in, you just like, you feel better. You're able to just like, especially when we're not
more present.
Yeah, you're more present.
Yeah, we're much more tolerable, not nearly as irritable. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, and that's why I say it's different for everybody. Like some people, it's like sitting and reading, honestly, and for me, one thing that's kind of grown, I talked about taking my daughter to the sitter, but the other is putting my daughter down for sleep now too. And I put her down for sleep every night, partially because when my wife puts her to sleep, she just wants to party. She just like is up and at it and jumping around. But I've started like a new thing too, where like right before I lay her down, I pray with her too. And that's something that I look forward to, because like selfishly, it's like, it's my time to talk to God too, even though I'm like praying heavily for Leah and for my family. But that's something that I look forward to as well, because when I feel so flustered throughout the day, and even though it's not that hard to just take time and talk to God for 2 minutes, I know I'm like, okay, tonight, whenever I put Leah down to sleep, that's my time to kind of just sit, talk to God, and kind of update him where I'm at, tell him how I'm feeling. And yeah, those are like two really big things for me, because I know that if I don't get a movement, if I don't get any type of movement in, and I really wanted to that day, whenever I go home, I'm going to feel flustered. I'm not going to feel present, because unfortunately, I'm focused on the area that I really wanted to get done today. But I think that it just looks so different for everybody, obviously based on the stage of life that you're in, but then different times of year. Like a non-negotiable for me right now is totally different than what it's going to be 6 months from now or something like that, right?
Yeah, I was gonna add to that. A commonality all three of you guys had in your non-negotiables was spending time with your family, specifically your kids. And from coming from someone who isn't in that stage of life yet, like, was there a shift when you grew up, or when you had kids or started raising a family, or was there like a catalyst that made you go like, oh, this is a non-negotiable now, this is important, this is why I'm realizing it is important to spend time and invest? And was that shift hard? You have less time to spend on yourself now, less time to focus on your personal goals. Yeah, was there a shift, and how would you pour into someone who is not in that phase of life yet, but wants to go into it with the right mindset?
It was a big shift for me.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it's like my first kid, like it was still pretty easy to balance, and like I love that I live very close to the office. I can go home for lunch. I used to not be able to do that. We used to live out in the country, and so I could work out on my lunch break and stuff. So I don't know. I think with her, I just had to change my timing of it all, but it wasn't as hard. It's like once we started, and you probably felt this way. You go from 1 to 2. It's like, okay, it's starting to change.
Yeah.
Now it's up to 4. But I think for me, the shift has always been, and I'm still, and I was really thinking about this today. I was listening to Francis Chan today as I was doing my chores, doing the dishes, and kind of the message of his sermon today was talking about like our society we're so focused on ourselves, and I started thinking about myself in that of like really the whole point of the Christian message is really to like not be focused on yourself and others, and it's very contrary to what we're doing. And I think for me, I was thinking about, man, I've been really just stressing about some small things and getting to me. And as I started thinking about it, I was like, it's because I'm so focused on myself, and I think I focus on myself so much that's when I start getting anxiety and stuff. It's like, it's because all I can think about is me, and so I think the beauty of marriage, children, and Abby, you're about to step into the marriage season. It's great.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's good. I think for me, having children was like I had to learn to give up of myself and to be more focused on other people. And it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, some marriages or families don't last because people can't do that, And so I think for me, I would say it's really still evolving. I'm still trying to learn to be selfless because I'm still so focused on myself. But that was the biggest shift. It was like, okay, these things that I thought were so important, really, they're all about me, about me, about me. And I'm still struggling with that. But I think that's been the shift. It was like, okay, and like you said, Wade, like when you call it a win when you spend time with your children, like I used to do the same thing of like, man, like I didn't get to run today, but maybe I spent 3 hours with my kids, but I still almost saw that as like a negative. And it's like, well, really, what matters here? I mean, that I get 1 minute faster in a marathon that I'm not even elite at. I mean, does it really matter? So I think just not focusing on myself was a huge shift for me, and I'm still learning. I don't have it figured out for sure.
No, I think a huge catalyst for me was when Eliza was born. So
yeah.
I wouldn't recommend this to you, Abby, or any of the listeners listening. The week our daughter came home, I told my wife I was quitting my job and I was going to go full on with MoveWell, which turns out I think it's still a good choice, but it's still jury's still out on that. No, I'm just kidding. Then I was working at a hospital-based system. I mean, I was working way over 40 hours a week and honestly just not happy. Like I would come home just miserable, honestly. And having my daughter be at home and seeing how much time I'm spending at work, and I'm just unhappy, and my fitness was slipping because honestly, I was working so much. I wasn't prioritizing any time for myself at that point. I was like, man, something's got to change. So I think that was a catalyst for me, was her being born. And like, how can our family envision a difference, and like, how can our life look different than what it does right now? Because in that time being after that, my wife went back home or went back to work that next year. And then she ended up asking not asking. She ended up saying she wanted to stay home with the kids or with Eliza, and we were pregnant with our son. And so like, how can we change our lifestyle to make that work? And so I think just Eliza being born was a catalyst for us. And I feel like with me too, it's also just trying to take a lot of the focus off myself, like you were saying, and put the focus, we were all saying, on our kids. I feel like I need to start focusing a lot more on my wife too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that should be the most important relationship that I have at home. And I can obviously see it whenever I don't pour a lot into Janae. Our relationship struggles, which then makes time stressful with the kids, makes workouts hard, makes work hard. But whenever our marriage is strong, that's whenever all the other stuff seems to fall in line a lot easier, at least for me. So I think really trying to focus a lot on life-giving things for Janae, because she's at home with 2 kids a lot of the time. And Amanda knows it's stressful. They lose a lot of their self-identity because they're giving so much of themselves. So that just made me think, like, if they're giving their whole life to our kids, I can give up 3 hours a day to go home and spend with the kids while they go do something for themselves too.
Well, too, like, our society is so focused on our kids. Like, a lot of times, like, parents just exist to serve their kids, which is not really how it's designed. We exist to serve our partner, our spouse, and then from there, then our kids. But we got it so backwards and all. And then and I think when you get busy with kids, you're running all over the place, and travel this, and this and that. And there's nothing bad with that. But then you start losing focus on your relationship with the person that really matters the most. Well, the 2 people that matter most, right? Like, it should be, God or whatever your higher purpose is. I mean, I would say for me, it's my relationship with God, and then my spouse, and then it's my children. But it's very easy to have all those reversed,
Well, I always, one thing that I heard like 2 years ago that I've shared with Emily, and we both like pretty well agree with the statement, was, once we had Leah, we both said, I was like, you're my most important person. I should be your most important person. Like, obviously here on physically, and then Leah, our daughter, should be the most important person. So like, that allows us to look at it as like, let's focus on each other, our relationship, but collectively, like, Leah is our most important person. And so I think that's helped us a lot too, because it is easy to feel guilty and like want to step away and like do a date night or have time to ourselves and feel bad about asking like her mom or our sitter to watch Leah, even when we don't have work all day or something. But we're like, well, we have to have time for ourselves, because I mean, when you become a parent, you realize most of the time, the only time you have one-on-one is when your kid's asleep. And even then, it's not the same as it was before. Right. So I think, kind of piggybacking into Abby's question, like, the catalyst for me was just becoming a dad, because it was so new. And I think that I was so focused. I had the time to focus on myself and goals that I had, that weren't as meaningful as things that matter to me now. And so I think, honestly, the biggest thing for me is like, being a dad forced me to slow down. And one thing that I always tell people who are new parents is that it's going to be hard if you want to be a good parent. Like, it's not going to be nearly as hard if you're constantly stepping away and doing things that you want to do. It gets hard whenever you have to make decisions that sacrifice your what you want. And so I think being a dad just forced me to slow down in the best ways. And it was hard for the first 6-7 months, because I'm so used to being able to go and step out at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. on the weekends and go run whenever I wanted. Whereas now it's like, I value that time to be at home with Leah whenever she wakes up. And it forced me to like make a decision without, or like actually having to think before I make a decision, because and realizing how it's going to impact my family. And honestly, a lot of it was trial and error. Like, I think it's good to go into parenthood with just an open mind. Like, I went in and people were like, oh, it's going to change. And whereas they were obviously very right, I think that is just annoying when people tell you how your life is
terrible.
going to be.
It's gonna be horrible. We were talking about that the other day.
Yeah, we're talking about the other day. But it did. I mean, they were right in the fact that everything did totally change. Yeah. But I think you obviously have certain control of that. But I think the biggest thing for me, honestly, that impacted being a good dad and balancing like the things that I wanted to do was just communication with my partner. Honestly, like, that was the biggest thing, because I kind of had like, the first, I'd say like 3-4 months into Leah being born, like, Emily and I had some really tough conversations where she was like, I need you more in this area. And then I think in those moments, you have to just be able to put your ego aside. And then that's when I started to realize, like, okay, my fitness, and at the time, like, fitness was right up there as like a priority for me before Leah was born. And that's when I really understood that's got to take a really big backseat, at least for a little bit. And so I think just becoming a parent in general, you have to understand that things are going to change, and not to put so much pressure on yourself of how it's going to look. Like, it's just trial and error and communication. Like, that was the biggest thing for me, was just understanding to like lean on your partner whenever you need them, and understand that like the moment you're in isn't going to last forever. I think that was the biggest thing for me. And actually, I wanted to get your all's like input on this, because you all have more than one kid. But Emily was talking to someone who had multiple kids and was asking, like, was it harder from 1 to 2, 2 to 3? And she was like, honestly, like 0 to 1 was the hardest.
Oh, really?
Like, that was by far the hardest. But I think everybody's perspective is different, obviously. So at what point did you find it like the biggest shift?
0 to 1 was a shift, obviously, but we kind of lived similar. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We liked going to parks
at that point. Yeah.
And we still could be in control of
Yeah.
it. It was for us, 2 to 3 was really tough. I mean, it was a tough one. It seems like 3 to 4 has been easy. She just kind of goes along, but 2 to 3 was by far the hardest. And we also had them really close together, only 15 months apart. But yeah, it's different for everybody, probably, depending. I mean, like the stuff we did for fun was like going camping before we had kids, going to parks, so like all of that stuff, our daughter just almost made it better because now we had a kid to share that with. But I would imagine, if you had a different lifestyle, it probably would be tough,
Yeah. Yeah. Ours was definitely different before. So I think the 0 to 1, hopefully, is going to be the hardest. What about you, Wade? Did you see a bigger difference from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, or is everything the exact same?
1 to 2, because I mean, right now it's not bad because you still have one parent to one kid. So I've always heard other people say 2 to 3 is always the biggest change and the hardest change. So I mean, I feel like right now it's the biggest change for us was like Janae takes care of Owen, I have Eliza. We don't really get much time together, so I feel like that's probably our biggest change in trying to handle that. But it hasn't been too awful, I wouldn't say. Janae may have a different answer.
Yeah.
But we won't ask her on that today.
Yeah. We don't have to, this isn't her podcast. We're not going to ask. We're not asking her opinion. If we want it, we'll ask. No, but I think I saw Abby. The reason I bring this up is I saw Abby post on her on social the other day about like establishing a routine, because you and Ryan, your fiance, just rented your first house that you are going to live in together once you get married. So I think kind of talk through how you're establishing a routine, because I think this is important too, because we're talking from the perspective of having kids and a family, obviously. But I think going through a life change like a marriage obviously is different, because still at that point you have your own routine, you have your own thing, but you're collectively living a life with somebody else physically. So talk through kind of how your routine has looked as it's been just you. And I know you're kind of like easing into a new routine once you move into this new house. So kind of talk about how that transition from the routine of just Abby is going into the routine of married Abby and Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's tough because, as we all are such goal-oriented people, like you all were saying, like it's hard, because it's that balance of like, okay, well, I did have these goals. I can kind of go and do what I want, but now I'm like not. And I really resonated with a lot of what you guys were saying, even though I don't have kids. Honestly, the hardest thing for me isn't necessarily the time management, just because I come from a field where I would study in college classes from 8 to 3, rehearsal from 3 to 10. So if I wanted to work out, it was like on the lunch breaks beforehand, those kind of things that, now it's just instead of 5 classes a day, it's work and then lunch with Ryan, or, fill in the blank. So that necessarily wasn't the biggest struggle as much as the transition of being at home to now being on my own. I mean, I'm 22 years old. I've lived with my mom since I was born, and have really honestly, besides a dorm room in college, I haven't really been on my own. And my extracurriculars, I go to the park. I'm in bed by 8:30. Like it's nothing really too crazy in that way. So I just get really attached to being at home and being a child, and honestly placing some of my identity in that, which, as we know, my identity is found in the Lord. And it's very revealing when change comes where your identity is placed. And so that's what I'm kind of working through right now, is like, oh, you don't need to seek for your mother and father's approval for things. You're forming a life on your own now. Like, you're about to become one with someone who that's going to be your decision maker partner, not texting your mom and dad for their permission, not going home and relying on them folding your laundry or doing your dishes, which are great things. And don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying them right now before
enjoy
we
while you
get married.
can.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Yeah.
while you can.
So
yeah.
But yeah, I think that honestly is the biggest shift. And in order to like manage those emotions, I have to tap into that time management of, okay, I know a run makes me feel prepared for the day and kind of is a release to where I can be my best self when the stress of that change does come. And so those are my current non-negotiables, but also knowing it's not forever. It's always going to change. And that's something that's hard to grasp, but it's also very beautiful because, God loves the process. Like if he wanted to create the world in one day, he would have, but he chose to do it in 6 and rested on the 7th. And it's like, if God, the creator of the universe, does things in a process, Jesus walked on this earth for 30 years until, we read the gospel. 30 years, like that's a lot of time. That's a lot of change. So like his creation, like if I were to think, my way or the highway, let's stick routine. I just have to remind myself, like, God loves the process. I should love the process too. It's so much greater than me and what my brain can think up.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that a great reminder though? Like
Yeah.
it's just a good reminder that just like the way you envision something when you first start it, you have this vision of like, I'm going to start it. It's going to look like this. And then here's the end goal. And then and I've talked about this before. And then as you get into it, you realize how much it's shifting, and it's easy to start questioning, like, was this how it was supposed to be? Or am I getting a little too off track? Yeah. But then like coming back to that reminder of like, and it's kind of a two-way question. You kind of have to just come to peace with, and that's probably just a lot of conversation with God, is when you start something, you're like, I feel it really heavy on my heart. Like God's telling me to do this. And then as you start changing it, you're like, am I changing it too much? Like, is this what he wanted? Or you look at it as, well, maybe this is what he wanted it to get to. And it's just a process. Like he wanted me to endure this process first. Yeah. Like it was going to go this way, but he's kind of it's starting to look different now. And you worry about that.
I think I've talked about it on here before, but there's a prayer that I pray every morning because I've talked a lot about how I have all these, like, I read my eulogy every morning. I read, I guess that's a non-negotiable, I guess. Yeah. I read kind of like my goals for the year. And then I say a prayer after that. It was written by a monk named Thomas Merton. And it basically says, like, God, I'm going to follow you to the best of my ability. And even if I'm wrong, the fact that I'm doing what I think you're calling me to should be enough. And then, but if you show me that I'm wrong, I'll shift. I'll go a different way. And that's always a reminder, because I read through these goals and all this stuff every day. And it's like in your brain, you're like, okay, I got to get this done. But maybe God's got a totally different plan. And if he does, like, I've got to be okay pivoting. And like, I think, for me, just thinking about on the Pinhoti 100 like race I did in November, and like I did well for myself. I did okay, and we had that video, and I got a lot of attention from that, of like, oh man, I watched your video, that was so cool, blah blah blah. And honestly, like, it made me feel good. Like it made me feel cool, that like people were saying, well, wow, I can't, how'd you, like acting like I just did something super super hard and I was special or whatever, and it kind of gets to your head a little bit. And so then, of course, immediately from there, I'm like, okay, what's the next thing? Because it's addicting to feel like that feeling is addicting. When you do something, you get a little bit of attention for it, and it's so small and so stupid, And so I was planning all this stuff out this year of I'm going to do this, and then just realizing as I've started this year of like, well, maybe I don't think these things are really fitting into what our family needs this year. And it was like a dagger, to like be like, okay, I've got to take a step back a little bit, from some of these things, and it was really hard to accept that. And I don't have like set races or anything this year. And I had I think we did a podcast on it. I had my whole year lined out exactly what I was going to do. Because I felt like I had all this momentum going, and then I was like, I'll do a YouTube series on this and this and this. And it's like, you know what, maybe I don't need to do any of that. And it's a really hard thing to accept. But what my goal says now that I read every morning for running, because I had last year, I was going to run 100 miles on November 4th, whether it was at the Pinhoti 100 or it was at Mammoth Cave or it was in my neighborhood. I was going to run 100 miles, and I did well. This year now it says I'm going to run 100 miles Well, specifically, I'm doing the Western States 100-mile race on June 24th, 2062. That's what my goal says right now. So 37 years from now, because what my eulogy says is that when I'm 75, I'm going to run the Western States 100, and it's the crowning athletic achievement of my career. My eulogy says, every morning I read this, it says, although he was a collegiate and professional baseball player, his crowning athletic achievement was completing the Western States 100 at the age of 75. And so I'm like, okay, if that's what I want to do and accomplish, I've got 37 years to do this, just like how Jesus had 30 years to actually reveal who he was to the world. I've got 37, literally double my life to that. And I'm like, you know what? If I can't go on a run today and I get to spend time with my kids, or I got to I started this podcast by saying I was going to run this morning and kind of complaining, to be honest with you, but my daughter woke up and I had to hold her and rock her. So if I missed 7 miles today, but I got to hold a 19-month-old like creation from God and rock her back to sleep, like, that's a pretty big blessing, you know? And so, and then also to me, it makes me feel better of like, okay, I didn't run today, but you know what? I'm not training for today. I'm training for 2062.
Yeah.
And it's changed my whole perspective.
Yeah.
It's made things a lot better.
Man, that's so good. There was something, maybe it was my mom that told me this, but she said, you know, when you get to heaven, like, Jesus isn't going to be standing there being like, amazing job for running the marathon in 3 hours and whatever, or great job for not missing leg day that one day. Great job. 6 days a week you lifted. Oh my gosh. I'm so, you know, it's like, that's not, although those goals are important and they're very beneficial, you know, honor your body is a temple, all of these things, but also like idolizing them, you know, and where is the weight in our lives and where is that taking priority is so, it just makes you like zoom out and you're like, what am I really here for? And it helps put things into perspective, which can help with your non-negotiables and help with your time management and saying like, okay, what is the most important? What's not as important, but is still a goal, and then form your, you know, schedule around those things.
We did a whole, you know, whole mindful minute series in our app about I don't know if that was this current month or last month, because we record them in advance, so I always get mixed up, but basically talking about habits. I guess it was last month, talking about habits, and I gave a whole talk on this month ago to a HR group here. And habit, we love to talk about habit, or we love to talk about goals. Like goals are so cool and sexy, and like, I'm going to accomplish this goal and this and that and this and that. But really, the point of my talk was the habits are what matter. Like, that's what actually makes you accomplish the goal. But really, none of that matters if the goals and the habits don't align to what your purpose is. Yeah. Like, you have to know your purpose, like the reason you are here, and it needs to be a lasting, like, strong purpose, not like, I want to get followers on social media, or I want to get, you know, whatever attention, or I want to have a fancy car. Like, if that's your purpose, it's not going to fulfill you. If you have a really strong purpose, and all of us are Christians in this room, like, I think all of our purpose is probably to get to heaven and to share God's love on earth, you know. But I think he uses us all in different ways to do that, you know. And so maybe our purpose is maybe a little bit more specific to how we think God is calling us to do that. But if you understand your purpose, then all this other stuff starts making sense. But then if you start having goals or habits or non-negotiables that have nothing to do with the reason you're here or your purpose, then why are you even doing them? Like, why does it even matter? You know, it's like, and then all of a sudden what ends up happening is like these goals, these habits, and your non-negotiables are rooted in this really self-absorbed thing. And then all it turns to is just anxiety and depression. And because they're never going to actually matter that much. And then you're going to be felt just leaving. You're going to get left feeling just empty. And what am I even doing? You know? Well, I think that's important.
Yeah. And I like something that I thought about from what we were just talking about, but also that is, you talk about the things that, like, that don't matter, that you get so caught up in the moment. And I think it's good to note when you think about things like, when Kevin said, like, getting followers and like getting recognition for these things don't matter. It's so, I mean, part of having free will as a human is getting caught up in those moments. Like you said, you've done that before. I've done it.
I do it every day,
all the time. Like, I do it all the time too. Just getting caught up in the stuff that like really doesn't matter. And hindsight's always 20/20. But I think it's good to recognize, like, an example that a tactic that I use a lot, whenever I feel myself getting really caught up in moments or getting flustered and like checking out of the moment that I'm in, is I'd like think back to that exact experience before and be like, okay, remember how mad I was at myself for getting so caught up in something that didn't matter. An example I use is, I think we talked about this last week, is whenever I'm putting my daughter down at night and I'm sitting with her and she's still awake and she's like she's like drinking her milk before she's going to bed and she's like looking at me in my face as I'm holding her. There's been so many times where I'm like on my phone because I haven't been on my phone for a while and I'm just catching up on texts I've had or social media, like stupid stuff. And then after I've laid her down and I go back out in the living room, I'm like, gosh dang it, like what am I doing? And I remember I've felt so empty and I'm like, now she's asleep for the night and she might wake up in the middle of the night, but I'm not going to see her again until the morning. And whenever I do, within 2 hours, she's going to be at the babysitter. Whereas her and I had 15 minutes, we could have just been sitting together and being with each other. So I think a good way to think about like getting past those times or like feeling caught up and you can feel yourself getting sucked in is just try to pause and think about a time you've done that before and just be like, how did I feel later on?
Yeah.
You know, and like being able to reflect and recognize like, okay, last time I did this, I felt so guilty for the rest of the night because I was on my phone and I could have been just staring at God's creation that he gifted me with, like right there in my arm. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is definitely time that I felt I've wasted when I could have been with, you know, with my daughter spending time. So I think it's good to just like try to slow down and just recall that time before. Like, what did it feel like mentally? What did it feel like physically? Like I felt like crap, honestly, you know, and being able to like take yourself back and that'll just help you maybe set your phone down or like get rid of the things that bring you pleasure for a minute.
This morning, I was like obviously you can probably tell I was having some stress anxiety this morning or whatever. And I was, you know what I wanted to do in that moment? Like I wanted to do so bad.
Get on Zillow.
Yes. Yes. So I had, Zillow, I love, and I'm like, and I think I talked about last week of like, I think it's my way of like trying to
escape reality.
Reality. But I realized today, as I was thinking about it, it's because I just want to distract myself.
Yeah.
Because I can do this thing, and all of a sudden my brain's just somewhere else. Yeah, it's escape reality, but it's also just a tool to distract myself. And like, how often are we just distracted? Because it's easier to stay distracted than not confront the anxiety or stress you're feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then to really go deep and think, okay, well, why? And what I came out with this morning was, it's because I'm being selfish. That's all, like, that's exactly it. Like I'm being selfish and that's why I'm anxious. And that's not the case for everybody. I'm not saying anybody that's anxious is you're a selfish person. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But for me specifically, I was so focused on how I was feeling and this and that. And I was not thinking about anybody else. And all of a sudden, well, okay, I'm gonna try to do this from Amanda today. And all of a sudden it's like all that went away.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I just shifted my outlook. Instead of looking at stupid houses that I can't buy anyways, I luckily didn't do that. And I just started shifting my focus off myself. And then and that's part of the reason why I started doing the house chores.
Yeah.
Is like, okay, I know these floors are a wreck. It stresses. She's going to walk down here and just going to be like, why the heck does he never do this?
Yeah.
And
start her day off bad.
Yeah. So I'm like, so maybe I can shift the focus off myself and do something for somebody. And all of a sudden I felt better. It's crazy.
Yeah. A little bit of reflection goes a long way,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, and that applies to anything. Like if we got our first responders going by us here. That applies to anything though, honestly, like not even just the example of like being selfish in a moment, but I think like when you feel yourself getting caught up in something that does not matter, like it takes, and again, I do this maybe 50% of the time, but like take 20 seconds to just like set your phone down and just slow down for a second and be like, what else can I do that's going to make me feel a little bit better about this? And I do the same thing whenever I get home with Leah. If I pick her up from the babysitter, I know like Emily is still working, and rather than just laying around and doing nothing, I'm like, I'll just go ahead and start on the kitchen, because I know that like it's gonna take me away from things that I was gonna do that were gonna be unproductive and an absolute waste of my time. Yeah. And so I think just being able to like reflect and just take like 30 seconds just to understand like what you're about to do and the impact that it's going to have just like goes a long way.
So it seems like a non-negotiable should be for me, at least. I need to have time for reflection. And I've been doing that a lot the last 22 days of like spending like at least 20 minutes every day of just completely quiet. And it has been really helpful, and I don't think most of us do that enough. It just,
there's so much distraction and stuff that pulls us away from that where we actually don't do it. But whenever we actually do it, that's the quiet time is something you never regret. Like it definitely grounds you and kind of refocuses everything that's important. And I just think about too, like my goal here on earth, well, not my goal, but one of my goals here on earth should be to help assist my family into getting into heaven and laying that framework for them. Right. So if I'm distracted on my phone, not loving my wife, not loving my kids, I'm failing them as a husband and as a father. So I feel like it's easy for us to go into that distraction, and the devil loves distraction, right? If he can't get to us other ways, he's just going to make us busy, and he's so good at that. And so just being able to reflect, go somewhere quiet. I mean, Jesus loved the quiet, and so if the creator of the universe is here on earth going into silence, we should be practicing some of that as well. And that just helps us be able to refocus and focus on what's important.
So these are all really motivating goals, and sounds like it takes a lot of energy out of you. But like, I get tired, life is tiring. I'm sure.
3 hours of sleep a night.
Logan's flexing his
My
energy
caffeine,
drink.
yeah.
But like, what about when I'm tired? Like, I have a lunch break. Awesome. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to. I get home. The floors are dirty. I'm tired. I don't want to. What do you do?
That's a good question for Wade to kick it off with.
Yeah, Wade just never
Wade
sleeps.
is the king of waking up at 2 a.m. and then going to bed at midnight. So
Not healthy, by the way. We're not advocating.
Not
for
condoning
that.
that.
I struggle with that too.
I mean, I feel like if you're tired, you just got to prioritize. I think is a big thing for me is if I go to sleep and this problem is still there and it's going to start my next day off stressful, probably suck it up for another 30 minutes to an hour to get the job done. I mean, whether it's dishes is always huge in our house, mound of clothes of 700 items of the kids, which I'm notorious for just ignoring and pretending they're not there. So I got to do a better job at that. And if it just takes that 30 minutes to an hour, I'm probably not going to sleep well because I'm going to be thinking about all the other things I need to get done the next day. We'll just go ahead and do it, and it takes, I wouldn't say discipline, but it just takes a lot of practice to do that. Because it's not something that comes natural at all, because especially when it's something you don't want to do, right? Yeah. It's something you can easily look past and push off for another day, but I always feel so much more accomplished and just start your next day off on such a better foot than if you just continue to push it off and push it off.
I think Stephanie, she did a whole sleep training to the city of Bowling Green fire or police officers. And I think too, like, I mean, a lot of us, maybe we go to bed at a certain time, but we're distracted and watching, our TV or phone, whatever it is, and we don't really get very good rest. And some of the, I'm sitting here looking at your energy drink. We're highly caffeinated, and like maybe we're sleeping, but we're not actually getting good sleep. Yeah. She was giving us just some great examples of preparing yourself for bed too is like really, really important. Making sure you're actually getting good sleep is important too. I don't stay up very late. I can't like if for me, if there's something that's a mess, I just go to bed. I know that's probably not the best thing to do, but for me,
I'm terrible. I'd much rather wake up in the morning.
I get up early. I don't have a problem. And it would being like, okay, this is a mess. I'm going to go to sleep, get some rest, and I'm going to get up early tomorrow and do it. I don't have a problem doing that. Amanda struggles. She's more of a night person. So she's that approach. She wants to get it done. I just go to sleep. So I think I try to get a normal amount of sleep. I'll get woken up by kids all night, but I don't know. I think you have to have rest. I think also you have to have a day of the week that's rest, right? So we've talked a lot about what did God do on the seventh day? Yeah. When he was creating the universe, he rested, right? Yeah. I mean, this is the creator of the universe. He rested. And I've been trying to do a lot better job. It's funny, yesterday, so I was at a men's retreat all day Saturday. And so, didn't get anything done around the house and just stuff for the week, need to get prepared. And so yesterday I was working around the house and Ava, my 9-year-old, said, "Dad, what about resting on Sundays? Why are you doing this?" I was like, "Oh," it was like a dagger, and I was like, "Well, Ava, I have to get this done." But it was just a good reminder of like, okay, you have to have a day of the week that you don't do that stuff and be able to recharge and stuff like that. And I think Sunday has become the meal prep day, the
chores day, everything.
Yeah, all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, but Sunday's almost like, okay, now we're going to work really hard Sunday so we can be ready Monday. But really, it's probably more Saturday.
Yeah.
Sunday is more like we're resting, recharging. I'm the worst at that.
Yeah.
But,
Sometimes it's hard though. After church, sometimes you just feel energized. Honestly.
well, but
you know?
also
It's like-
our society's not set up that way anymore,
Right.
right? Like everything happens we're busy. We're
Yeah.
so busy on Saturdays
We
that
had to get ready
have-
for these Super Bowl parties on Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, Super Bowl
well,
yesterday.
we're so busy on Saturdays that like we have to have Sunday to be that day. Where
Yeah.
back in the day that wasn't always like that. You know, I think there was a little bit more.
Back in the day, Kevin's showing his age here on the podcast.
Yeah.
y'all.
Back in the day. Yeah. Now it was well before y'all's time.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, well, put
Oh,
this
travel
perspective.
sports.
I'm
all that, yeah.
37 years old. Travel ball did not exist when I was a kid. Travel baseball,
Crazy.
travel sports did
Hold
not.
on. So you're saying you made it to professional baseball without playing travel?
Without,
ball?
Wow.
without taking lessons.
Without
Yeah.
having an
Wow.
Instagram too.
But yeah, Twitter, or X, whatever. But like that did not exist.
Yeah.
Like there was no such thing as a 10-year-old playing travel baseball when I was a kid. Like just think how fast that changed. I played 12 baseball games in the summer. That was it. Like think
That's
about
wild.
that. Now
Yeah.
kids play that in a weekend. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, and they think they're falling behind and this and that. And we wonder. Sorry, I'm getting on a whole sports thing, but we wonder
I love
why.
it.
You know, people when you look at professional sport like baseball specifically, where are all the athletes coming from?
Yeah.
All from
Dominican
the
Republic,
Dominican
Puerto
Republic, yeah,
Rico.
Latin America, where
Poor
they're
places where they're not traveling the world.
skill development over time.
They're just playing in the yard,
Yep.
you know, and
being kids.
being kids. So, anyways, yeah, I do think back in my day, we were set up very different. Like
Yeah.
weekends were not about going and doing travels, this or that. I mean, it was.
That was time for us to spend with family.
Yeah.
We'd go visit our aunts and uncles, play with our
Yeah.
cousins,
Yeah.
worked on the farm. Yeah, I mean, we didn't really travel or go do
And
anything.
that wasn't just a unique experience just to us. That was
Yeah.
for most kids.
Yeah.
That was for most kids. And so our kids are not kids anymore.
Yeah.
And as a result, our families aren't families anymore. We're shuttle services. We're running everywhere, and there is no time. So I don't know, Abby.
this-
I think really there isn't much time in our society
Yeah.
right now to have a rest and recharge. Honestly, if you want to have a house that's in order, you want your kids doing all the activities, you want to excel at your job. There really isn't time anymore. So I think
Yeah.
that's where we have to take a stand and be like, we're going to do something differently here. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to operate differently as a family. I'm going to operate differently as an individual, and
and you're
build,
going to be an outcast
yeah,
to everybody
of
when
it.
you do that.
and you're
you
going to
know?
feel like your
And
kid's behind, and
Yeah.
you're going to feel
when we tell people we don't really let our kids watch TV or have an iPad, man, you
Yeah.
think they look at you like you got three eyes
Yeah.
on those things. And especially like, obviously they're not old enough to even play like travel ball or anything like that yet. But even just reading some of the literature on it and some of these books Janae's been reading on it, like we'll probably take a pretty strong stance against it.
yeah.
At least not in the capacity that it's currently
Yeah.
in, you know. So you'll get judged and ridiculed on it just because
Yeah.
your kids are going to be different. But the family time and the values that we want to instill in our kids will need to take precedent to the societal pressure that you feel.
And then whatever, if you're supposed to be a professional baseball, if that's really what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like, and for me, I mean, I was homeschooled like
Yeah.
back in the 90s. Like
Yeah.
there was not
It wasn't cool
homeschoolers,
then, yeah.
and there was no homeschool baseball team
Yeah.
or basketball team. So my parents started one, but I mean, people were like, would tell us all the time, you are doing your kids a disservice by not putting them in the Greenwood or wherever because they have talent. Why aren't you doing this? They're never going to get a scholarship. They're never going to do that. And it worked.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
neat.
like,
yeah.
and honestly, it worked. And then by 23, I wasn't playing baseball anymore. I was released, and I'm now having this huge identity crisis because that's where I put all my self-worth. Is I thought I had to be this professional athlete.
Mhm.
And okay, so I was about 23. You know, like 23 years old. That's gone anyways. And for
Yeah.
most, that's the reality for most kids and all of
Mhm.
us. We're investing all of our time in stuff that's fleeting, but like, why are we not investing time in stuff that's lasting? You
Mhm.
know, and so I mean, that may mean like you said, well, you got to do things differently. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and then I got that. All that goes back to understanding why you're here, your
Yeah.
purpose. What do you want to accomplish? What's the real reason for life? And we got to ask ourselves those deep questions. If we never ask ourselves those deep questions, then we're never going to know, and we're just going to live a busy, distracted life that we come to the end of it,
Yeah.
and we're just like, why was I here? And that's
Yeah.
why we have so much
Anxiety.
depression, anxiety. That's why suicide rates are skyrocketing. That's why addictions are skyrocketing. That's why we see recovery places everywhere popping up.
Everywhere.
I mean, because that's the reality of our society right now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to me, I think I'd rather go against the grain a little bit. You
Yeah.
know, if that's what a lot of the outcomes are. And again, not that any of this stuff is bad, but
Right.
it's just you got to have somewhat of a balance
Yeah.
in all of it.
And I think it's easier for us to say that, one, because it's cool to see someone turn out somewhat normal from the background, like
homeschool,
Kevin
yeah.
and all his siblings. Mainly, I was talking about Jim. And
Yeah,
Jim. So I
Jim,
was
yeah.
talking about you. No, but then also to surround ourselves with people that are great at going against the grain. You
Yeah.
know, like y'all were talking in here normal. Abby was talking earlier about you were telling your mom how cool it is to work at a place where people don't think it's crazy whenever you run the amount of distance that you run, you know, and it's not crazy to speak what people would say are unreachable dreams on a daily basis in here.
Yeah.
So, and just being surrounded by people that want to raise their families the same way, it's refreshing.
Yeah.
Because it makes it normal for you, and you just got to be able to confide and find people around that want to take a stand against honestly, a lot of distraction stuff, deal with the phone, social media stuff that has been shown to be terrible for your kids at a young age. And like knowing that's not the life what we want for them. If we were all saying like
It's so
a
much
lot of our
easier to-
non-negotiables are for our kids,
Yeah.
we're about to walk into a phase of life where it's going to be a lot harder than what it is from
Yeah.
what we're controlling right now. But it's going to be hard not just going to that
And
societal.
I sent you guys this quote, original, by the way.
This is an original Kevin Wynn quote.
Yeah, it's texted.
I thought
it
I
to you.
told you that last week.
Chat GPT is
Yeah.
an original.
Go ahead.
God gave us one mind and one body. It's our responsibility to seek the limits of both. And I think it's easy to hear that and think, okay, that means I'm going to push. But it also may mean like I need to go internal
Yeah.
Mhm.
and like just sit.
That's harder a lot than the action sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for me, I mean, to say that I'm the worst, but like I could spend my time looking at houses on Zillow or whatever it was. I used to be scrolling through political stuff and getting angry, or I could seek things that actually matter, you know? And so that's where I want to put my time.
Yeah. Well, I think it circling this all back, balancing everything and the things that you want to balance in your life all comes down to just making tough decisions, like being able to sacrifice the things that bring you a little bit of pleasure in your day. And for some people, that's Zillow. For some people, that's like stepping out and honestly, like using exercise as a way to get away from everything. Like sometimes you just have to sacrifice in certain areas of your life. But at the end of the day, if it's going to help you do the things and accomplish the things or be there for the things that actually matter to you that you want to do, then I think that's what matters.
I think everything, you need to have a clear picture of where you want to go. And everything else in your life, except I'm not saying relationships because we don't want to use people, but it's just a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Phone's a tool. Car's a tool. They're just a tool to get you to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And if anything is taking you or diverting you off that path, and it could be people, like if people, I don't say use people as a tool, but if you have relationships that are going to divert you off that path and take you somewhere else that you don't want to be, then you don't need them in your life. You know? You don't need this thing in your life. You don't need this. And then for your family, like if my goal is to get my children to heaven and there's certain things I'm exposing them to that I know is not good for them, what am I doing? You know? Or maybe I'm putting them in a situation that, hey, maybe they'll one day get a scholarship. That always cracks me up. But, you know, I'm putting my kids on these things because, they get a scholarship if I spend all this money on lessons and this and that. I was like, well, you could just have them study.
Yeah. Or use that money for school.
Nobody. It's not cool to talk about your kid that gets 34 ACT. I mean, like
Janae's pretty cool. I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, like that's not as cool on social
No,
media as
yeah.
your kid hitting a home run or scoring the winning touchdown. Like, that's not why you're doing it. Like, just be honest.
It's all for you.
It's all for you. It's all for you. And just be honest with yourself. And where am I trying to go? And am I using my family to do that stuff too? You know, like, just got to be honest. And you're never going to know unless you just sit still and be and stop and remove the distractions from your life. You know?
I was about to say, I think a good next step is just sit back, reflect for a little bit, give yourself
Get
time
fired
to
up with
think.
this podcast.
I
now.
know.
For the next 10 minutes on this podcast, we're going to
gonna-
be dead silent.
Yeah.
We're not
Abby's
say
going to play a little
word.
bit of meditation music
I'm
for
just
you
gonna
guys.
stare at you in the camera, and we're going to make some life notes.
Yeah, but I think that's a good stopping point though. Really, just take some time, reflect, lay out some priorities, lay out some goals, and that'll help you strive to get to where you want to be. And it's going to take longer than you expect too. So just be patient. Recognize there's going to be trial, and there's going to be error, but just keep that purpose and keep striving.
Sorry, I got to keep talking.
Oh my gosh!
Well, I'm just saying, as you do this, as you create the goals and all the stuff, like put them somewhere where you're going to see them too.
Yeah.
Like, don't write them down and stick them in a drawer and they're like, oh yeah, like I wrote this. Like, you've got to remind yourself over, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy doing stuff that making changes is going to hurt. It's hard. It's painful. It's tough. Like, and you've got to just stay committed, and you have to have the right people.
Yeah.
Like we talked about what we've created here, of like people that are like-minded that can help you in that and hold you accountable.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I wanted to say. I just wanted to add
telling
that in.
people to help hold you accountable and speak it into existence.
Speak it.
Because if you just keep it to yourself, it's naturally just going to be 10 years down the road and you haven't done any of it.
And we
We've
can
been
say
there
that we've
before.
done all the
We've been
stuff.
there.
We've done
Yeah.
all the stuff. And
Yeah.
we talked to a really smart business guy. We had lunch a little over a year and a half ago. Remember, I'll never forget this quote. I know you know what I'm going to say.
Yep.
Is sometimes you have to just will it to happen.
Yep.
You have to will it to happen. You have to speak it into existence. You have to make it real. You have to tell people, and you have to put it in front of your face and see it every single day. Whatever that thing is.
Will it to happen, baby.
Will it to happen. Y'all got all that? We're going to check back in next week and make sure. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good stopping point for today. So thanks for tuning in today, and we'll catch you next week.